So a few years ago I moved into a small one-story house in Northern California. The neighborhood was just outside the suburbs and it seemed like the perfect balance of having space not too close to the neighboring houses and not too far from the nearby stores and restaurants. The area had no street lights, so it was very dark at night, especially if there were clouds blocking the moonlight. So I'm a nurse and I often get stuck working on holidays. But I don't mind since I don't have much family. Like always, I worked on Christmas Day and found out that I had to work on New Year's Eve as well. I ended up working overtime and got home around 7 at night. It was a cloudy night, so as I pulled up to my house I was only able to see what my headlights and front porch light illuminated. When I got out of my car, my nose caught a smell of a cigarette. It was odd since I had never smelled that before around my house. Also, I didn't see anyone nearby, so I ignored it and went inside. I was exhausted from my shift, so I decided to take a shower and call it a night. I was slowly falling asleep, but suddenly, I woke up after I heard a noise inside my house. I wasn't worried right away though, because my friend would sometimes stop by to use my shower after work on his way to his night classes. I even gave him a spare key so he could stop by even if I wasn't home. He would always text me to let me know beforehand. I reached over to my bedside table and picked up my cell phone to see if my friend had sent me a text. It was 9:30 and I didn't have any message from my friend. I set my phone aside and called on my friend's name. There was a couple seconds of silence before I heard loud footsteps as someone started running through the bottom floor of my house. I left the bed and ran to the closet. The person in my house was already up the stairs by the time. I had opened the door and stepped inside. The house had 3 rooms upstairs and 2 bedrooms on either side of the hallway. I was in the spare bedroom, and also there was a bathroom at the end of the hallway. I heard that the bathroom door was cracked open. Whoever was in my house went past my door and into the bathroom. Despite my panic, I quickly devised a plan, realizing that I'd have enough time to open the attic access in the ceiling of my closet and hide there. I just started to lift myself up when the person ran back out of the bathroom. My feet were barely inside of the attic. When my bedroom door burst open, I heard footsteps run into my room and stop. When they didn't see me in that room, they ran back to the hallway and into the other rooms, which just had boxes stacked. I guess the person decided that if someone was hiding, it would be in the bedroom, because they immediately charged back into my room and turned on the lights. A moment later, the closet door was opened. I was crouched in my attic. From my vantage point, I could only see the person's knees. Down, the person was wearing dirty blue jeans with frayed cuffs and worn work boots. After a few seconds of looking in the closet, they stepped away and I heard a loud crash come from my room, followed by a scream of frustration and anger. The scream was the most unnerving part of the incident for me. It reminded me far too much of my stepfather, who would scream in a similar way when he lost his temper. He would eventually be put in a mental hospital for several mental disorders that resulted in erratic and violent tendencies. The man in my house ran back down the stairs. I then heard noises of things crashing. He was knocking the items and furnitures in my house. I left my cell phone when I ran for the closet, and I wasn't certain I'd be able to climb down without him hearing. After some time, the noises stopped. I decided it was safe enough to climb down and call the police. The first thing I noticed when I exited the closet was that the intruder had flipped my bed over. I assumed he did that in an attempt to find me. I couldn't find my cell phone, so I went to the landline by the bed and called the police. I waited in my room until I heard them call out from downstairs. The guy in my house had messed up all the rooms by destroying the furniture and pictures. As far as I could tell, though, the only thing missing was a single knife out of the wooden block in my kitchen. The police checked the house from top to bottom. They found that the side door had been forced open by something like a crowbar. They found a few cigarette butts along my fence line. They also found some foil and an empty pen tube, which the police said people often used to do drugs. Police assumed the guy had been watching my house for a while. I realized that he must have been out here smoking a cigarette when I got home. They collected up the evidence and told me I should stay with family or friends that night and to get the door fixed as soon as possible. I decided not to sleep that night. I moved a shelf over to block the broken door and spent the next couple hours cleaning things up. I would often go to the window with the flashlight and shine it along the fence line where the police had found the cigarette butts, but I didn't saw anything. The next day I called to have the door fixed and got motion lights installed at the back and sides of my house. I ran a phone cable up into the attic and added a landline there. I never wanted to be stuck up there without a phone again. I lived there another 3 years without any incident. I tried not to think about what could have happened to me if I had been a bit slower getting to the attic. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't cross my mind every time I crawl in my bed every night. So this story happened on the New Year Eve of 2015. I am from Iowa, and the winters here get very cold at night. The snowfall makes everything dead silent. Well, my best friend and I were hanging out in my family's walkout basement. We were just having a boring New Year Eve playing video games. We were also the alone in my home because my mother went straight to a bar from work to grab a few drinks with coworkers. So me and my friend thought it would be a good idea to break into the family wine and enjoy the new year. As we were sitting there opening up the first bottle, I heard the door to the garage opening and shutting down. I thought my mom was in the house and immediately looked for places to hide the bottle. I then heard a few heavy stomps and heard my mother call my name. I yelled back up the stairs saying I was just hanging out in the basement. I heard a few more steps move from the garage door towards the stairs and she asked me to help her with something. I replied I will be there in a minute, and then there was silence for a few minutes. She asked me if anyone was there with me in a voice that was slightly off of my mother's. This was the first thing that told me something wasn't right. Our family never cared if anyone was over. Our house was a very open house to all family and friends. The voice was also just wrong. It sounded like my mother's, but it was missing something that I couldn't put my finger on. I replied to her that it was just my friend. After I yelled that back to her, I found a good place to hide the bottle and began walking up the steps to the next level. Now as I was walking up the steps, I couldn't help but feel the overbearing silence of the house, and I had a feeling that something wasn't right. When I got to the top of the steps, there was pure darkness because no lights were on. I walked over to the kitchen and called my mom, but there was no reply. I was getting scared because this situation was very unusual. I had this feeling that something was not right, and it was not my mom. I ran back down the stairs, grabbing my coat along the way. I explained everything to Colton and we decided to get out of there. I pulled out my phone to call my mom and she picked up immediately. I explained everything to her and she said us to stay in the basement, locking the door, and she would be home in 5 minutes. Colton and I stayed in the basement until she got home. Before she did, we could hear something upstairs, not walking or sitting. We could just feel the presence of that thing. When she got home, I could feel the thing leave just as quickly as it came. We still have never figured out what the hell was going on, and this is just one story of many unexplainable things that have happened to us. I still wonder what that was and how it talked to me in my mom's voice. My mother has passed away now, and I have moved away to Arizona. I will never truly know what happened that night, but I know that whatever it was that had my mother's voice, it was not a human. So 2024 is in few days, and whenever New Year Eve comes closer, I remember that incident. So this incident happened 3 years ago, at a New Year's party. It was New Year's Eve night and I was having several friends over at my house. I was really close to the city and in a very busy neighborhood. It was a 2-bedroom, 2-story house, and at the time I had only lived there for a few months. Most of my friends and the people that I invited were from work. We all worked for in a fairly large company and most of us were in the same department. At first it was just going to be about 5 of us, but soon around the word spread in the office and a few other people asked if they could come by. I said sure, and I was excited because I felt like the more people the more fun it would be. Most people were going to bring something like a food or a drink, and then we could all share and play some games and stuff. My house has more space than I need, so I felt like I could set it up really nice for everyone. When New Year's Eve came, people started showing up at about 6 p.m. I started with my best friend Ben, then a few more people came. Before I knew it, there were probably 15 or so of my friends and coworkers there. We had lots of snacks and played a few games. I remember at one point there was this one guy inside that I did not recognize. I wasn't really sure who he came with, and I noticed that he was talking to Rachel, who was one of my coworkers. I assumed that maybe he came with her, or at least he knew her, because they looked like they were deep into a conversation. Later on I saw the guy again, and this time he was just kind of standing in the corner. It seemed a little suspicious to me, so I decided to ask a couple of people if they knew who he was. Nobody that I spoke with knew him, However, I decided that I would go locate Rachel and ask her who the guy was. When I found her, she was in the dining room sitting at the table talking with another coworker. I tapped her on the shoulder and asked her who the guy was. She told me that she had no idea who he was, but she thought he was acting like a creep towards her. She then told me that the guy told her that he was an old friend of mine. I got nervous when I heard this. I was sure that I didn't know this guy at all. And I had no clue how or why he was here. I knew that I would have to ask him to leave, but I didn't want him to make a scene there. Conflict is usually something I try to avoid. I walked back out to the living room and looked to the same corner of the room that I had seen him standing in, but now he was gone. I assumed he left and felt a little bit of relief. I went over and asked one of my friends, Jake, who was nearby, if the guy had left. But instead Jake told me that the guy had gone upstairs. My relief feeling went away immediately. There's no reason for the guy to go upstairs. The whole party, he was downstairs, and I had a feeling the guy was up to something. I found Ben and told him about the guy going upstairs. He agreed to go upstairs with me to check in case the guy was dangerous or something. We both walked up the staircase and into the dark hallway, which had 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. We both immediately noticed that the door to the spare bedroom was just closing. I knocked on the door asking who was in, but nobody answered. We waited for minutes, but no one opened the door. We decided to go downstairs, and I was hoping that the guy would come back down and leave. I decided that if he didn't leave, I would just call the police. By that time it was pretty late and nearly midnight. We remained downstairs for a while, probably more than an hour, and after midnight, people started leaving. Ben stayed with me to make sure that the guy would leave. After some time, everyone else was gone. It was just me, Ben, and the mysterious man. We went back upstairs and knocked on the door. We said we were going to call the police now, and we both waited for a response. Things were silent for about 10 seconds, and then we heard the sound of somebody walking behind us. We turned around to just barely see the guy going down the stairs. After that, the front door opened and shut. The guy was gone. He must have been hiding in my bedroom instead of the guest bedroom. Ben and I were just happy that he was gone now, and the craziest part is that he didn't steal anything at all. This made me worry if he came here just to harm somebody. I searched the entire house, and luckily I didn't have to see any dead body. I still wonder who he was and what his intentions were.